Hello and welcome to a bit of a different video from usual. I got Borderlands 3 on PS4 recently. It's been one of my favourite franchises of all time. So yeah, I wanted to do a video on reviewing it for you and see if you guys sort of enjoy it as much as I do. So I fell in love with Borderlands with the second game really, and then went back and retroactively played all of the others. Oddly enough, I wasn't really a big fan of the pre-sequel, which came out after 2, but I did like Tales from the Borderlands, which was like an interactive movie rather than a game, and I normally hate those. And then Borderlands 3 got teased in March and announced very shortly afterwards, and I basically just slipped into a 6-month hype coma, basically. So Borderlands 3 released on the 13th of September, and is set an undisclosed amount of time after Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 had a bit of DLC that they released for free called Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary, which basically filled in some of the blanks in the middle. There's a lot of recurring characters here, mostly from Borderlands 2 and Tales. There isn't much from the pre-sequel or Borderlands 1 as such. So the game follows the same format as previous games, with 4 characters to initially choose from. There's Flak, the Beastmaster, who gets the support and brutality of a menagerie of animals to assist him. You've got Mose, the Gunner, who can call on a mech for herself and her allies to use. Amara, who's the Siren, there's almost always a Siren in each game, who can sort of hulk out and use her powers to turn enemies into punching bags. And finally, Zane, the operative, who makes use of drones and decoys to sort of misdirect and confuse enemies. He's who I've been playing as predominantly, and I'm really enjoying him. Each of the heroes has one of 3 action skills that they can choose from, with Zane being able to pick 2 at the cost of losing his grenade. The villains this time around are the Calypso twins, who are a pair of murder streamers. That's apparently a thing now. I think they're Gearbox are sort of taking the mick out of streaming and things like that a little bit. They're both sirens, and they're basically trying to open the vaults and stream it to their legions of fans who are the children of the vault. So the game this time around has a very expansive story, taking place on multiple planets with a host of sort of new and returning characters. Gearbox have said that the story is around 25 to 30 hours long if you beeline it and skip the majority of the side missions, but as with the previous games, the real meat comes out with the content that you've got after you finish the story. So True Vault Hunter mode returns to serve as the new Game Plus sort of mode, and then you've got Mayhem mode and Guardian ranks that add a lot of variety afterwards. Guardian ranks are basically the same as Badass ranks from Borderlands 2, and they start taking effect on any character you play after you finish the story for the first time. That means basically later on down the line you can start a fresh character and you can have all sorts of different buffs to apply to your character, which basically just give you different ways to play. So Borderlands obviously has always been about guns, and lots of them. Gearbox have said that there are over 1 billion guns in this game, and the elemental types are obviously featuring heavily as well. So you've got fire, corrosive, shock and explosive are all making a return. And then slag from Borderlands 2 has been replaced with radiation damage, which basically infects targets and it will spread to nearby other enemies as well, and slowly whittle down their health. Completely new as well is cryo damage, which basically as the person takes damage from it, it will slow them down, and then it gets to a certain point and it will freeze them completely for a short amount of time as well. Weapons also have dual fire modes, which is a really nice, interesting sort of addition to it. So basically you can get secondary attacks like explosive rounds or elemental damage that you can switch between, or you can have a shield on the front of your gun, things like that, and it's sort of lots of different ways to keep you sort of interested in playing. I do like this time around that all of the items, like the weapons and the shields, they feel much more like you've got to make a compromise as to what you go with. So do you choose to sacrifice your shield capacity for a higher damage output, things like that. In addition to the new weapon options, you can also mantle obstacles, sprint slide to cover, and also use like a jumping slam attack, which just helps you sort of dominate the battlefield even more. So there are 4 planets to explore this time around, rather than just being stuck on Pandora. Pandora still features, obviously, but there are the additions of Promethea, Athenas, and Eden 6. Now, what I love about the different planets is that they have layouts that would be in keeping with what each planet should be like. So Pandora is a huge desert planet, so there's a lot of open space and like dirt tracks and things like that. And then a handful of hours into the game, you travel to Promethea, which is a sprawling city like sort of Coruscant from Star Wars, and open spaces just don't feature at all. It's all sort of city blocks and sort of multiple levels, like having a freeway and things like that above, but it still gives you plenty of areas to explore. The player hub, is now a spaceship, albeit still called Sanctuary. It can be a bit sort of difficult to find your way around when you first start. There's a lot of different things there, like shops and things like that you need to go to, and they don't give you much instruction on how to find it, but you don't need to spend very long in it to find out sort of where you're going and have a better idea of where you're trying to get to. So another new feature with this game is the level of interaction with sort of between players. So obviously players can now play together in groups of up to 4, and this time loot is separate for all players, so there won't be any sort of competing to get to chests first. Also, difficulty can be set to scale with players or not. A group of 4 players can choose to have enemies scaled so that it makes it easier on everyone, or they can just choose to accept whatever the host's enemies are, and sort of, for better or worse, have a crack at those. Borderlands 3 is also incorporating some very interesting features between friends. So players can now send items to each other through a mail system, and there's a feature where like a strong enemy that you might find in your game can now pop up in your friends' games and challenge them as well. The other interesting thing that I don't think has really ever been done before, or not to this scale perhaps, is that anyone who streams the game on Twitch can have their progress sort of helped or hindered by their viewers, who can gift items if they're feeling nice, or they can take control of badass enemies to sort of get in the way and try and cause a bit of trouble if they're feeling maybe not so nice. So when it comes to Borderlands, I've seen a lot of people say that 3 is just sort of more of the same, and I can see where they're coming from. My question is that such a bad thing? So if Borderlands 2 had released a sort of a smaller new bit of DLC every 9 to 12 months, I'd probably still be playing it fairly regularly. GTA Online has been releasing a major update every year or so since release, which was 6 years ago, and I still play that pretty much every week. Borderlands 2 was an amazing game in my opinion, with loads of great features and a humour style that matches mine almost perfectly. It seems to me that people can get distracted by needing games to sort of break the mould and have all sorts of new features, when sometimes all that's really needed is a bit of fine-tuning and some fresh narrative. The GTA games are a great example of this, where they all follow a sort of fairly similar experience, but they just jump around the world and bring sort of new locations and stories. A game, in my opinion, doesn't need to necessarily be trend-setting to be a good game if it's found a format that works. There are some incredible games out there that don't necessarily do anything groundbreaking, but they're still great games in their own right. Regardless, Borderlands 3 is a great addition to the franchise, with some nice polishing from previous games, and then a few new features thrown in too. I don't think it's unfair to say that the looter-shooter genre is where it is today because of Borderlands. I mean, it's one of the original looter-shooters. And this just makes me sort of more excited for what there is to be offered in the future, and with DLC and things like that. There's plenty of planets and people to see, and obviously there'll be more coming once the DLC starts to get released. If you've played previous games in the series and enjoyed them, I think there's definitely plenty here for you to get stuck into. So, those are my thoughts on the game. Thanks very much for watching the video. This has been a sort of a nice little break from doing RuneScape videos, and I'm keen to do the odd review here on PS4 games that I'm a big fan of. RuneScape content will be coming back next week, and I appreciate you all watching. If you enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing. It really does mean a hell of a lot to me to know that people are enjoying these videos and watching them. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at MightyAfroRS. If you have any comments or ideas for videos that you'd like to see me do, then let me know on Twitter or leave a comment. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.